Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm Blair. We're ready, Kirsten. We're ready.
I literally just interrupted. I thought you said we were ready. Okay, I'm ready.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's go.
All right. Take two. Everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm Blair.
And I'm Kirsten, and we are mediocre content. And I think this is going to be a good episode.
Yeah.
I'm ready for the vacay of my dreams.
Girl, we got a lot to talk about in this one. All right.
that's
Y'all are not ready, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. So if you think that I'm going to say that you can never go on a cruise ship ever again, you would be wrong. So just, hang in there. The first half is going to be a little depressing. So just be aware.
I mean, to be fair, even if we did say, yeah, never do that, this is not a place where you take advice. And
oh, true. You're right. You're right.
So technically we could say, oh my God.
Yeah. But yeah, no advice. So advice. Honestly, do whatever you want. I don't care.
Don't heed our warnings at all.
Don't. But if you want to learn about how cruise ships are bad for the environment and how you can cruise responsibly, then keep listening.
Blair's environmental cruise talk.
Exactly. That's what it is.
Our science corner has evolved to the science episode.
This is, all of our episodes are science episodes from now. Like, we should just it should be mediocre science content, honestly. It should be like
the name.
It should be like wannabe science teachers have a podcast. Fair. That's what our podcast should be.
No, you're right. You're right. I think that's fair.
All right.
I'll do the disclaimer if you want, because you've got a lot to talk about if you decide.
Yeah, I'll talk fast. It's gonna be good though. Yeah. So I feel like we kind of covered the disclaimer.
Yeah. But obviously, no advice. Do your own research. Encourage. And that's it.
Blah 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 blah.
You know the
blah,
spiel.
Blah, blah.
You got it down pat. So I'll jump us into good news, which is also science related. So woo! Kirsten's Science Corner.
We need to make like a little jingle. I'll get on that. Let me put that on my list.
Blair's gonna get a
jingle.
Watch. We'll see next time when we put the jingle on there. It won't be science related. I'll just spoof you.
I know. It's gonna be like Kirsten's Science Corner, and now talking about candy or like some kind of,
yeah. Something random.
I honestly, the first thing that came to my brain was science related. So I don't know what's wrong with me.
Bias. Okay. So our first bit of science news has to do with a vaccine that the FDA has just approved. And it is also one of the first of its kind. And that is a RSV vaccine that was approved on May 3rd. And this is to prevent something called respiratory ailment. And it is a milestone in the search for a way to protect older people from this virus. The shot was developed by the pharmaceutical company GSK, and a Pfizer vaccine for pregnant women and the elderly is also nearing approval, which is also great. Most people with RSV or respiratory syncytial virus, don't come for me on the pronunciation, report having mild to moderate cold symptoms. However, older people are significantly more vulnerable, and every year more than 60,000 American seniors land in the hospital because of RSV. So this is a big problem.
Indeed.
It can also be very serious for babies, which I'm sure a lot of us have been hearing in the news recently. So it doesn't just affect the elderly, it also affects babies. And of course, those who have underlying conditions and struggle with breathing in general can be hospitalized in pediatric intensive care units, or of course, if you're older, in just ICU units, depending on the severity of your issues. Regulators also now are reviewing a monoclonal antibody treatment for babies, which would be developed by Sanofi and AstraZeneca. So they're making progress. They've already got one vaccine approved, so we're headed in the right direction. And this has been a very serious issue, as I said recently. So it's good to see that they're making some improvements and also have more on the way.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just a small
Yep.
addition to that is, I'm so glad they're making a vaccine for this, but also if you or someone has RSV, it's going to be okay. And also, just remember that a lot of people get the flu every year, and some elderly people die from the flu every year. And just be aware. So it's kind of the same thing. So just, take a deep breath.
That's kind of punny, don't you think?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Dang, Blair.
Take a shallow breath as best you can. Use your inhaler. I don't know what to tell you.
Take a few huffs of breath to the best of your abilities.
But yeah, so just with a grain of salt, get your vaccines.
Yeah, just be smart about it. Do your research, as always. Yeah. And then in Norway, they are now leading the way to electric vehicles. So drive up to a gas station and you'll find tons of charging pumps over in Norway. Last year, 80% of Norway's new car sales were electric, and the country plans to phase out gas-powered cars entirely by 2025, which is huge goals because if you don't know, it's currently 2023. So they got 2 years to make it happen.
Yet another way in which Scandinavian countries are blowing us out of the water.
Okay. A slight side note on that then. My one thing about I guess comparisons is that's really fantastic, and there's more in this article about it, but it's also on scale. So I think scale is also important. Like comparatively, the United States is significantly more vast. It has a lot of different laws and different, it's just a little more complicated. But
it's different.
It is different, but I think moving in that direction is still good. And I think learning from these countries and learning from their strategies is a good idea, just to see what worked, what didn't work, what are we currently doing? You know what I mean? Like just kind of compare in that way.
I agree. And that was not me trying to shade them in any way. It's just, I hear about this stuff all the time, and I love, I want to go to there.
Great.
It's great. It's great. And they have beautiful Christmas markets there, and everyone's so happy all the time because they're top rated in citizen happiness, which
Blair's
is amazing.
Real reason. The Christmas.
Christmas markets, happiness, bicycles, and hot drinks. I don't, because it's cold all the time. I don't know. It just seems very cozy up there. It just seems nice.
Yeah.
And they're doing everything they can for the climate, and everyone's on board, and it just seems so great. But I don't know. And I mean, I love the country that we live in is lovely, but we also have our problems. And I just feel like every time I hear something about Norway or Sweden, it's always amazing. It's like everyone wants to be us. And I'm just I can't.
With the hair flip.
Everyone wants to be us. Hair flip insert here. So I don't know. It just so no shade or anything. I admire them for what they're doing, but also I kind of feel like the ugly cousin or something over here.
It just takes a little bit longer. We're a little bit bigger with a lot of differences of opinions that affect our legislature and movement, I would say.
Yeah,
that's a nice way to say it.
A political channel,
right? Yeah, it's a lot of different. There's a lot of different thoughts in the hat on this side that don't always align. That's my nice way of putting it. Anyway, so far, Norway's experience suggests that electric vehicles bring benefits without the dire consequences predicted by some critics. So you'll also hear, I know recently when Tesla was first kind of coming out and starting to get big and they were starting to promote more, one of the questions was, okay, well, what do we do with the batteries afterwards? Because now you have these giant batteries that, decomposition, how do you dispose of them? That takes more energy to dispose of than it does to just drive, a gas powered vehicle for some, depending. So those are some of the controversies that have come up. So it sounds like Norway is kind of tackling a lot of those and kind of showing that it may not be as extreme as you might think to kind of deal with those problems, is my understanding. The air in Oslo is cleaner, which I'm assuming is their version of the electric vehicle, just the name of it.
No.
Oslo
is a place.
Okay, so Oslo is the
really quick.
Okay, good.
Oslo.
That was the only confusing part about this. It was just like the air in Oslo is cleaner, but it never like said. It never like said.
I believe is a very large city, maybe the capital of Norway.
Perfect. Cultured.
Yeah. Done.
But they're saying that the air there is cleaner with greenhouse gas emissions that dropped 30% since 2009, and that is a huge number. 30% may seem trivial. However, when you're talking about emissions and the reduction of emissions, that's extreme progress.
Totally. I agree.
And there hasn't been an uptick in unemployment at gas stations or auto mechanics, nor significant strain on electrical grids. Also a big deal, because I know, at least here in the States, one of the biggest issues that we have with a lot of these changes is the potential for unemployment.
Exactly.
And maintaining jobs, because that's important. People need to survive and live.
And I think one of when we were doing the Cars episode with Chris, your brother Chris, he was concerned because I admitted to having a Tesla, and he was like, well, I don't like your car because it puts me out of a job. And I saw, and I get that. That's like totally reasonable.
Right.
So that's really interesting.
Yeah. And I guess it depends on the field, right? Like, it hasn't shown a big uptick. I'm sure there's still unemployment, and I'm sure some of it is still affected by that, but it's not like this massive onslaught of just jobs gone,
Right.
Exactly. So that's important to note. And while there have been a few changes, like new EV drivers struggling to learn how to plug in their cars, different tax breaks and easily available charging stations took away all of those friction factors. And that was a quote by the CEO of Volvo Cars, Jim Rowan. So there are good things. There are still kinks, I'm sure, that they have to work out and be conscious of as time progresses. But I think this is always good information to share, that somebody out there is doing it pretty effectively without major setbacks. So it can be done. Again, going to our previous conversation, it's just like scale and speed and those kinds of things.
Totally. Yeah. And I'm sure they have, like, just from a car perspective, they have probably less cars than we do, because there's public transportation, and like bicycle transportation is like huge over in Europe in general. So, I mean, the number of cars is like very different than what it is here.
And that's just because things could be closer together. Like, again, the states are very vast and not everybody lives in a major city. What? It's true.
And the fact that like the auto industry basically said, don't put in public transportation and we'll just have everybody drive cars.
I mean, for sure, that too. But to be fair, also, I don't knowing where I came from is like, if somebody had to work in Richmond and you lived in Mechanicsville, number one, you could have public transportation, but in most cases, to get to that, you'd have to find a way to get there because you're so far out of the city. So like, it's kind of a weird mixture of problems. Yeah.
But if the city decided to invest and expand in public transportation out into Mechanicsville or like wherever it is, just a thought. I think about this a lot. I think about the amount of cars we have and like how much more I would want public transportation. Like, have you seen the memes online where it's like millennials want two things? One of those things is a bullet train from the East Coast to the West Coast.
That would honestly be nice.
Japan has it. Why don't we have it? I mean,
that's fair.
So anyway, I relate to that so much. I love public transportation. I have ridden a lot of public transportation and I love it so much.
I'm glad that's probably where we differ.
One thing about me is public transportation is like my favorite thing.
That's good. I don't like it, but that's a topic for another time.
Okay.
But technically it's kind of on topic. This is a different kind of transportation.
Yeah, so this is this is like voluntary public transportation.
Yeah.
So, like I said earlier, we are talking about cruise ships today.
So fun.
And if you have never been on a cruise ship, some food for thought in this episode. As you guys know from, I believe, a couple of episodes ago, maybe a month ago, I can't really remember, I did go on my first cruise this year. And it was not an ideal situation. Not necessarily to the fault of the cruise line, but it definitely, I don't think it would have been magical or like great if like if everything had gone perfectly on my cruise.
Right.
But we'll talk about that, later. We'll do a little recap of that. So just to get some perspective on like what cruise ships, like what we're dealing with, I guess, is so the total number of cruise ships in the world is 302. And that's
really low.
Well, yes, but that's mostly, so the website that I looked at for this stat, they had like the 37 major cruise lines. So those are boats that hold as many as like 12,000 people to 60.
Okay.
So there's probably like other smaller ships and other smaller cruise lines out there. But so like of like your Carnival and, Royal Caribbean and Virgin and like those big ones.
Okay.
So I think it was like how many different ones? Yeah. So 37 different companies from all over the world. There's 302.
We have a cat visitor.
Thanks.
Bro.
He like never wants to come hang out. And then we're in the middle of something.
Yeah.
Anyway, enjoy my cat's butt on the camera.
Thank you. Thanks, Jinx.
So a total, let's just say roughly of 302 cruise ships.
Okay.
Big like cruise ships in the world. There are 37 major cruise lines. And each, like I said, let's see, it is the Royal Caribbean cruise ships that have 26 ships, 112, well, almost 113,000 in capacity.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Too many people.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
That's what I'm
saying. Yeah. So they have the most, right? Yeah. And then your Carnival and MSC Cruises, Norwegian, Princess, and I learned through my research that Carnival is actually a conglomerate of a lot of different.
Not surprising.
Yeah, a lot of different cruise lines. So their total in general is like much higher than what is listed here. You've got your Disney. They have 5 ships. They only have 5. But that is a total of 17,000 people that could be cruising with Disney at any time.
And to be fair, I was just kind of thinking, you're like, 302 is kind of low. These are massive vessels. Now that I'm thinking about it, like
they're floating cities, like legit.
I know. I was like, well, maybe 300 seems like a lot now.
No, they're giant.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a lot. And so potentially with all 37 of the major cruise lines and all of their ships, you could have maybe 650,000 people cruising all at once if all the ships are like out, like doing thing. Yeah. Which is a lot. I mean, it's a lot in the scope of like the amount of people in the world. That's not a lot.
Yeah.
I think it's enough to impact, the climate.
I kind of want to
So,
know how many people could be flying in the air right now. I'm gonna look that up while you go on to your
okay,
because I
all
just
right,
now
go
want to
ahead.
compare it to like how many people are in the air right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot more airplanes, but they're smaller, so I don't know.
Right. Exactly.
An interesting thought. Thank you, Kirsten.
You're right. I just want to compare it. Okay. So depending on the source, about 500,000 people are estimated to be up in the air at any given time. So it's
Oh,
pretty comparable,
yeah.
honestly.
No, that's about right. Okay.
I was just super curious.
Love that for us, land, sea, and
Land and sea.
water.
I like it.
All right. So, why are cruise ships bad for the environment and how do they affect the environment? That's what we want to know.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah,
Let's go.
because if we've got all of those
Mhm.
ships all over the world, we want to know why they could potentially be bad for us.
You got me thinking we need to do an airplane episode now.
We could.
I'm
We
stuck
could
on
do
the
an airplane
planes.
episode.
Really stuck on it.
One at a time, Kirsten. One at a time.
My brain is going too fast. Just
All
ignore
right.
me.
So an article from Popular Science, basically their tone for their article was don't go on a cruise. It's bad for the environment. And during COVID, everything was better because we weren't going on cruises. And I was like, you guys you're stressing me out. This is too much. I feel like a bad person now. I went on my first cruise.
Oh.
There's a good chance I might go on another one. So here are some stats. Cruise ships burn up to 250 tons of fuel per day. One cruise ship produces roughly the same amount of carbon as 12,000 cars. But I don't know in what time frame. I'm not sure if it's like a week or a month or like
That's
what
fair.
they failed to, include that.
I wonder if it's just like per day then, if it's 250
Yeah.
tons of fuel
Yeah,
a day.
per day.
Maybe it could be just 12. That's the
It could
equivalent.
be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be. So anyway, the other thing is that cruise ships are poorly regulated. A lot of like the environmental impacts that they have or environmental issues
Right.
or rules that they break essentially go unreported.
Nice.
Fun fact, a study has stated that air quality on a cruise ship is like living in a large city.
Also
And
not surprising.
I think they mean, I don't know if that means like outside or inside or both. I don't know. But yeah, I mean that makes sense to me.
Yeah,
They have
I
that
mean,
big like smokestack on the top.
exactly. Well, right, exactly. You are in open air and moving for the most part, though.
Yeah. So I wasn't sure if they meant like the air filtration, like from coming in and out, or like
Right.
if it's just on the deck. I'm not quite sure. But open air helps, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, open air doesn't help the environment because it's going
No.
into the open air, but like your
Right.
air
But
quality.
in the air that's going into my lungs.
Right.
Right. That air.
Right.
So cruise ships use what is called bunker fuel. Bunker fuel is a thick tar-like fuel that's high in sulfur, and it comes from leftovers of the refining process and used for large ships. Super fun.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Black carbon is often referred to as soot, and this is like that's a byproduct of the fuel. And it is produced by burning this fuel and also by wildfires.
Makes
so
sense.
if you're, the EPA claims it is linked to cardiovascular disease, cancer, and birth defects.
Which
Not
also makes
surprising.
sense.
Yeah. None of this is revolutionary information.
No.
Black carbon is often burned by ships that travel near the Arctic and Antarctic, and the pollutant lands on the sea ice and snow, and then it melts them faster.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that.
It can also get into clouds and help evaporate them more quickly, which causes further warming because clouds help reflect sunlight. The particulates from burning bunker fuel often get cleared out of the air through precipitation, thus eventually polluting the ocean. So, although there is some fuel and oil and things that get into the water, I think what they're trying to say here is that it affects the entire water cycle, basically.
Right. Yeah. But I would love to know scale. I think, again, because if it's something that isn't just used on cruise ships, for example, like
Mhm.
what percentage that's coming from cruise ships is also lumped into the total percentage of pollution we have going on. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
not that it matters less, just curiosity based,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, and I think too, you think of there's all of these other ships that are just
Right.
like, you know what I'm trying to say, but I
Yeah,
can't say
right.
because you just agreed with me. But it was like,
No, I
um,
got you. I understand what
yeah.
you mean.
So
The
there's
cruise
other
ships aren't
ships
the
that
only
also,
ships.
right? There's
Yeah.
other ships that also do like, what word I'm looking for? Um, they transport goods
Yeah.
and cargo ships. That's what I'm
Cargo
looking for.
ships and
Yes,
merchants
cargo
and
ships.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly. So they're, and not even to get into like the military side, because they also have giant ships and
they
things.
do.
So it's like
A
this
lot
is
of
a
their giant ships
subset.
are nuclear
Oh,
power though.
right. Well,
So it's
some,
different.
I mean,
It's a different
sure,
kind of pollution.
but
Yeah.
but that's the thing. It's still pollution. So again, like what percentage and how,
So
where's it lumped between everything, you know?
so the only the only nuclear power's only pollutant is the actual like uranium that like gets buried in the middle of a desert somewhere. There's no other pollution that happens with nuclear power.
That's
What?
still pollution.
I no, I understand, but it's like less than okay.
I don't know. I get what you're saying, and it's less in terms of that kind, but I mean, it's still pollution. It's still not good,
Right.
you
Yeah, but
know?
like yeah. Yeah.
There's still ships outside of cruise ships that are affecting this whole scenario too, which is sad.
Yeah.
Great.
So the solution to this problem could potentially be specifically the fuel problem, not the cruise
Right,
ship
right, right,
problem,
right,
but the
right.
fuel problem could be implementing batteries to fuel ships, which would be less affect. So it would affect the air quality, ozone layer, less CO2 into the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Although, batteries are still,
Right,
getting rid of them is a problem. It's not emitting and making a hole in our ozone layer. So
right.
batteries are more energy efficient for small to medium sized ships that aren't going long distances, but for journeys longer than a few dozen miles. Hydrogen
Mm.
fuel cells are necessary for bigger ships for long distances. So yeah, and so because the batteries become so heavy the farther you want to go, and
Yeah.
you would be using up more. So it would be better to do like a hydrogen fuel cell.
Okay.
Some ferries are already being transitioned to battery power. A battery powered ferry in Denmark just set the record for the longest trip on a single charge by traveling 50 nautical miles.
Again, in
That,
Denmark.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
Norway and yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That ferry is less than 200 feet long. Norway unveiled the world's largest battery powered ferry last year, which is over 400 feet long. And the world's largest hybrid ferry will start transporting passengers between Britain and France in the next few years. So, yeah, again, just another way that the Scandinavian countries are blowing the rest of the world out of the water in terms of like their energy use and
I
things like that.
cannot I'm living to see the day when we can implement that on things like cargo ships, because that's fantastic and it's definitely a step in the right direction and I love to see the progress. But I'd also love to see it being used for the larger things that aren't just like luxury travel or like back and forth between countries, but it's more like I can't think of the word that I want to use. It's not economic, I guess. Or maybe it is. But like these bigger operations that require these long distances, require these heavy loads.
So like global transportation
Yeah, I
of like
guess.
goods and resources
Yeah,
and stuff. Yeah.
I'm so excited.
Supply chain. Supply chain.
Yeah,
That's what you're
yeah,
looking for. Yeah.
right. I think it's great to use it on these smaller scales to see what it would take, but I would love. I'm really excited for when it evolves into these larger scales.
Yes, definitely. So the Friends of the Earth, which is an organization that I found during this research, they put a nice little graphic together and they evaluated 18 major cruise lines on 4 different like environmental factors. So one of them is how they treat sewage. So moving on from fuel, I should say. So 4 other environmental factors: sewage treatment, so whether a cruise line has installed and published data on the most advanced sewage treatment systems available instead of dumping like minimally treated sewage into the water, because that's a problem. Air pollution reduction. So we kind of already touched on that a little bit. But basically, whether cruise lines have retrofitted its ships to plug in to available shoreside electrical grids instead of running their engines and polluting the water around the dock. And then water quality compliance. So to what degree has the cruise ship violated the 2010 to 2021 water pollution standards designed to better protect the Alaskan coast? I believe so. That was interesting to me that it was specifically the Alaskan coast and not just like water in general. But I think that this particular group is based in Alaska. And that's why. And also another thing that I found looking at different articles and stuff, which I thought was interesting, is Alaska has a huge environmental conservation push, as well as, and especially with like water vehicles and like fishing concerns, because I think it's a huge industry out there. So they're much more strict on like what you can and can't do off the Alaska coast, as opposed to like if you were to come down to California or something like that.
That makes sense.
From what I can tell. I don't know. Yeah. So just, ignore me if that's wrong. But it seemed like to me they were like huge. They wanted the cruise ships to be like a specific, meet a specific standard before they were to cruise on the Alaskan coast, because everyone talks about going on Alaskan cruises and stuff.
Right.
Like that. Anyway, side tangent. And the other thing that they evaluated was transparency. So did the cruise line respond to their requests for information in regarding their environmental practices? And so they put together this entire like report card, and no cruise ship line got an A.
Not surprising.
A lot of Fs. The ones that got C's, so Regent of the Seven Seas got a C plus, and that was the highest score. They were able to respond about their environmental practices. They comply with water compliance. Their lowest score was air pollution reduction, and they were able to, and their sewage treatment was up to standard. So Disney comes in at a C, and then it just goes downhill from there.
Also not surprising.
Just something to think about, no shade. But yeah, it's cool to look at. We'll link it. You guys can look at all the different grades that they received. So the cruise industry has committed thousands of environmental violations over the past 20 years. They claim to be transparent and follow industry-related guidelines, but without independent oversight, the industry will continue to violate environmental laws. I thought a lot about oil spills and things like that with this topic. Just putting that out there. Because there's no regulation. Basically, it's really hard to regulate. Like Carnival Corporation was on the U.S. criminal probation from 2017 to 2022 for illegally dumping oily waste into the ocean.
Nice.
Yeah. And during Carnival's probation, their cruise companies violated federal environmental laws by dumping wastewater, oil, and plastic into the ocean and polluting our air. So without court oversight, most of these violations would have never been appointed. So one of the things that this particular organization feels needs to happen is there needs to be somebody on the cruise ship that's like an outside person to kind of monitor the practices and make sure everything's going the way that it's supposed to go. Another thing that's kind of a problem is when cruise ships get rid of their sewage, it increases the algae growth, which reduces the available oxygen levels in the water, and the manatees die. So upsetting. And it affects, fish, shellfish, coral reefs, all aquatic life, and then it affects us because we can't eat what's in the ocean.
Right.
So the US EPA estimates that a 3,000 person cruise ship generates 150,000 gallons of sewage per week. Which, fun fact, it can fill up 10 backyard swimming pools.
I didn't need that fact, but thank you.
You're welcome. And that adds up to more than 1 billion gallons of sewage a year for the industry. So that would have been, I mean, I guess if people, I was thinking like, well, wouldn't that people have to go to the bathroom either way? Like it doesn't matter if you're going on a cruise ship or if you're going on at land. Home.
Right.
But if you're going on land, it gets disposed of and it goes to a different path than if you're going on a cruise ship who doesn't dispose of it properly and just dumps it right into the ocean. So on that note, I know this is a very bleak topic right now. But
so fun.
After the ad segment, we're going to talk about ways that you guys can still go on cruises and the environment won't be as affected and it'll be much more delightful potentially for you. So
well, let's cruise on over to the ad.
Sounds good.
Man, I'm glad this podcast is halfway over.
Me too. I'm not sure I'm even going to make it through the second half at this rate.
It's a good thing they call this mediocre content. That way the public knows what they're signing up for before they even start listening.
I feel like the listener deserves a more direct warning about the true mediocrity of this podcast.
Agreed. Let's send them into the second half with a real disclaimer.
Mediocre content is far more mediocre than you think. If you think that's what's good for you, you listen at your own risk and moderation. We, the husbands of the mediocre content podcast hosts, do not recommend you listen to our wives week after week and instead suggest small regulated doses of their mediocrity at any given time. We should know. We live with them. All mediocre content podcast listening is at your own risk. Good luck.
Welcome back from the ad. How's it going?
So good. I'm hoping you have good news for us in this half of the cruise adventure. I'm excited.
So I have some things to like consider. Information that is coming from the National Parks Conservation Association.
Nice.
And their recommendation is basically we have to ask these questions.
Okay.
When we cruise. So the first question is, does the company partner with or donate money to any nonprofits that play a role in global stewardship? So this thing that you can find on the About Us section of the cruise line. And I will also say that in this particular article, the person who wrote the article, where these questions are coming from, they did an Alaskan cruise on a smaller cruise line that was called Uncruise. And their whole thing is like responsible cruising, I guess, basically. So have a low impact to the environment. They help the local economy where their cruise line is active. And So just keep that in mind, like with these questions. Because the other thing is, if you can't find this information about the cruise line, then it's probably not a good cruise line to pick if you're concerned about environmental impact.
Mm-hmm.
So, does the company partner with or donate money to any nonprofits or play a role in global stewardship? So basically, are they engaging with the communities in which they come in contact with?
Right. Okay.
The second question is, how does the company manage its waste? So we're, our 3 R's that we learned in 3rd grade or whatever, reduce, reuse, and recycle. So if you think about it, a lot of cruise lines, I know when we were cruising, they were like, you can get bottled water and that's like it. So, or you can get a drink and
Right.
like, like an
Yeah.
alcoholic in a cup
Mm-hmm.
thing. So I feel like you have to be conscious of and know how your cruise line disposes of, plastic and,
Mm-hmm.
all of their other waste products. We
Yeah.
just talked about sewage in part 1. Like we need to
Yeah.
know what they're doing with that. And one of their tips is don't just ask whether cruise lines recycle, but which items they recycle. So like what
Mhm.
kind of plastics, because we all know there's different kinds of plastics.
Too many.
And, how they reduce the use of disposable items. When I was on my cruise, though, they did use paper straws.
Nice.
So take that with a grain of salt. I don't know.
I hate those, to be honest with you, though.
Yeah, they're the worst.
They are literally the
It's
worst.
so bad.
I would take a compostable straw over that garbage any day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Ugh.
Third question, does the company hire local guides and work with local souvenir vendors? This one I thought was interesting because I'd never really thought about that. But the cruise line definitely has the ability to just reach out into the local economy and say, hey, we have all these people coming.
Yeah.
What can you do to help us out? And how can we like benefit your local economy? And I think that that's really cool. Especially when you're trying to get like you're going on the cruise to travel to a place you've never been to before and you're trying to see like what the culture is there.
Mhm.
So who better to learn from than the people who locally are there?
I would say that's one thing that I did find. What, like, I don't necessarily know. Like, of course, there was like a freaking Ron John surf shop on one of the islands, but like not all of them, and some of them were too small. So a lot of them were kind of local. I don't remember what we rode on though.
Cool.
Can't remember. Maybe it is.
Yeah, I feel like our people were definitely hired by the cruise line. They were not like people who lived in the community.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant like the souvenir vendors that you go to when you're on the island. Sorry. Yeah. I highly doubt they use local guides, but I think like the souvenir vendors might have been. I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah. Makes sense. So does the company pay its staff adequately and follow reasonable labor standards? Again, something we did not really touch on in the first half, but is definitely a problem, or not something that you as a consumer could consider, I guess.
Sure.
Some cruise lines are ships in countries that allow them to pay low to no taxes. Carnival is definitely guilty of this. And they offer low wages and poor onboard conditions for their staff to avoid strict labor regulations. So one way to know if a cruise operator is abiding by the U.S. statutes and regulations is to confirm that the ships it uses were built in the U.S. and are owned by a U.S. company.
Okay.
So sadly, there's only one ship with a major cruise line at the time of this article, which was, I believe, 2018. Give me 1 second. I'll double check that for you guys. Thank you.
I love that music. It will forever haunt my dreams.
Same. If they ever get rid of that music, it's going to be
I will
Crazy.
literally cry.
Oh, okay. So the article was written in 2018.
Okay.
So since
Time of the article.
it
Yeah.
could be different now.
Yeah.
But at the time of writing this article, it was the Pride of America was the ship's name, and it was based in Hawaii.
Oh, okay.
And they're the only one that abides by U.S. labor laws.
Interesting. Okay.
So another reason why it's probably worthwhile to do a smaller ship for a cruise line is because smaller businesses are more likely to register their home country in their home country. So if it's a smaller cruise line, it's more likely to be registered in the United States if that's the home country that it's in. Right.
Gotcha. Okay.
Another question, where does and how does the company source its food? So,
Okay.
you have to feed everybody. And if you've been on a cruise, you know that there's a 24/7 buffet, and that's a lot of food.
It is a lot of food.
So, it's apparently there is a program called the Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch program that has a website, and you can confirm that your cruise line participates in that, and that'll be able to tell you if they are sourcing their food locally.
Interesting. Okay. Well, that's kind of nifty.
I don't know if that only applies to like seafood.
Right.
I'm not really sure, because when I think Monterey Bay, I think seafood. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't look it up because I just didn't have time.
That's fine.
But if y'all want to, you're more than welcome to do that.
That's right. Do your own research.
And then the last question to ask is, what is the total cost of the trip? Because if you're going on so basically the recommendation is, if you're going on a small boat that locally sources its food and locally sources the souvenir vendors and the local guides, and you're going on all of these excursions, or you want to go on all these excursions, like it seems like it could add up to a lot of money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if everyone's getting paid fairly, and if everyone is being treated appropriately, like it adds up, right? So what is the total cost of the trip? So things to think about is many small ship cruises with responsible practices have higher listed prices, but a lot of them are including all of the different excursions, including, meals. So, and a lot of the larger companies, they charge extra for excursions and like a drink package and, whatever. So just make sure when you're looking at the price, you know exactly what you're getting for each thing, and compare it with like a larger cruise line that's cheaper, quote unquote.
Right.
So those are just things to consider.
Nice.
I found it very helpful to, kind of, because you can like weigh your pros and cons and see what you think. I did look at the Uncruise website, and it seems like a really cool, they go to a bunch of different places, not sponsored, by the way. If they wanted to sponsor us, I'd be down. But they go to Alaska, the Hawaiian Islands, Colombia, San Juan, Belize, the Galapagos Islands. Perfect for science podcast.
Science.
So, I think that a smaller ship, that is transparent about what they're doing, as they take people from place to place, is what is a better way to cruise if you're concerned about the environment. Nice. If you're not concerned about the environment, then that's fine. But
but if you are.
If you are. Yeah.
Nice.
So this information, Kirsten, how do you feel? What are your thoughts?
It's complicated for me because I could understand, obviously I understand the science part. That's not too hard to grasp. And I understand the importance of being environmentally friendly and wanting to be conscious about them. I think that there's got to be some kind of balance between the cruise lines being more responsible that are currently out there, also having more environmentally friendly ways to do what they're currently doing, just again more responsibly and more consciously. But obviously, like anything, even on land, when we're talking about small businesses and supporting them and making sure that, there's room in the room on the playing field for them to be successful also, especially when they have these other factors that are heightening that experience, because they're still taking you to Belize, but they're also not waste dumping and not,
Right.
being rude to the environment and also giving you a good experience. So there's like,
Mhm.
for me, it's all about balance, because I also get financially, for like the majority of people, that uncruise may not financially be an option, but you still want to give
True.
your family an experience, like
Right.
I totally understand that. And that's why a lot of people do the main cruise lines, because they usually have like package deals and just ways to make it financially friendly for you.
Yeah.
So again, I think there needs to be a balance. I think the cruise lines need to be held responsible for,
Right. Yeah. I mean,
just do the right thing. Like I think that's kind of it's sad
there's
to say
well,
it, but
and I feel like
yeah.
there's a lot of legislation that could be passed to like
Yeah.
help with that for
Yeah.
sure.
And I think also outside of legislation, I think having that personal accountability, or having that person, that third party, say, hey, if you want to keep running and you want to make this a thing, here are the things you need to clean up.
Right.
Like I think
Exactly.
that's what happens in any other business. So
Right.
um I think that's kind of my main takeaway on that. Again, just the balance between them. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. Definitely. Um, yeah. Did you hi Tyler.
Interrupting.
So what are things that you like about cruising? Like
None
what are
of
when
it.
you don't like any of it? Okay. Not a fan.
I was very sick the entire time. Uh, uh the islands were beautiful.
Mhm.
I will rescind that. Not everything sucked. It was just the ship itself. I'm not a fan. I also don't like being out in the open water for the same reason I don't like being in the air. Like I
Mm.
just want to be on land.
Yeah. One thing about you is you like your land and you like your cars.
I definitely do.
Mhm.
I we didn't really do a lot of flying when I was growing up, and we certainly didn't have the money for cruising. So the first cruise I had was actually with Tyler's family in our it was like December of our senior year, I
Mm.
think. It was the first time I was out of the country. It was also the first time, or one of the third or fourth times I'd been on a plane. It was also the first time I'd ever been on a ship, and all of those
Wow.
things combined was just kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it, we talk about price. It's not like this was anything to sneeze at either. I also contributed and paid part of my way there. I was really,
Yeah.
grateful to have the family's help, but the islands were lovely, and I think it was really great to see uh just the different cultures that we did encounter. Like we went to St. Martin, we went to, oh god, it's been so long now. That's the only one I really remember. But overall, the island experience was great, boat experience, but I hated that every single moment
Fair.
of it.
Fair. Yeah.
Absolutely sick the whole time. What about
Makes
you?
makes sense. I mean, yeah, I think one of the biggest gripes that I had a fine time on the boat. I
Mhm.
did take meds to help with that though.
Mhm.
And then I I really liked our onshore excursions and stuff like that. My
Mhm.
biggest thing was just the weather was like not cooperating
Yeah.
with us, which I mean nobody can control really.
Yeah.
So, but I like the whole time I was there, I was like thinking, like, well, what are they going to do with all this food and like all these things that like, you know what I mean? It just seemed like so much. Like there were so many people
Yeah.
and there was so much like stuff going on. It was just I was like, how is this okay? I don't understand.
I mean,
Like,
they do call it the Walmart of the sea, so I mean, it's
right.
not like it's
Yeah.
surprising. I honestly, it
Yeah.
might be bad. I did not think about any of that,
Well,
to be
yeah, I mean,
honest.
but you are like what? out of high school, so 18, something like that.
I mean, sure, but I gotta be honest.
Yeah.
I don't know if that would be my first thought as an adult either. Even if it
Oh.
just because like I figure when you're planning those trips, even if you think about it for just a moment, the bottom line is you still went and you're there to have a good time and like experience something new, and like all
Yeah.
of those factors are good to think about, but also it could really ruin your time if you're not
Well,
careful.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we had the cruise experience
Yeah.
to the best of our ability, and
Yeah.
knowing what I know now, and
Sure. Yeah.
knowing that cruising is not like probably my ideal way to vacation,
No.
would probably I would think about it a little bit more before I
Right.
did it again. You know what I
Right.
mean?
It would influence your future decisions.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
I'm glad that I experienced it at least once and like
Mhm.
decided, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe
Yeah.
this isn't good, like in a broader sense. I don't know. If you love cruising, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm happy for you. Like, good for you. Some people really are out here, like they know everything. They go on a cruise every year. They like love it so much, and I'm happy for them. That's wonderful.
I couldn't, just from a wellness standpoint. I
Yeah.
can't handle it. I'll
You're
never
just gonna
get my
be
sea legs.
dehydrated and just like sad on the floor.
I would just lay on the floor the whole time praying land comes.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my god. Well, that's lovely.
Yeah.
Um
So anyway, if you guys like
Yeah.
cruises, let us know. Tell us what you think, because
yeah.
and if you're going on a cruise, let us know if you like any of these, or planning to go on a cruise, if you like any of these tips, and see what you think. I don't know.
Or if you use any of these tips already, or we'd love to know like where you go and visit. I want to know where you're cruising to, honestly.
True. Yeah.
But you can send all of that to us via email at mediocrecontentpodcast@gmail.com. You can tweet at us at mediocre squawks, or you can go over to Instagram and give us a follow at mediocre content podcast. Anything else from you, Blair?
I don't think so. I think we'll see everybody next week.
Sounds good. Cheers.
Cheers.